Hi, welcome to the New School. I'm Lauren Redness. I'm a professor here in the School of Art, Media, and Technology. Thank you all so much for coming. So we're thrilled. Oh, okay. Is that okay? We're thrilled to host today's screening of Andrei Tarkovsky's 1979 film *Stalker*, with discussion by an extremely distinguished panel led by Geoff Dyer, author of a new book on Tarkovsky. Incidentally, congratulations to Geoff for winning the National Book Critics Circle Award for Criticism this week. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Lawrence Weschler, who put together today's program and will explain its unique format. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Ren Weschler is a national treasure. Ren is a writer whose work defies categorization. He's really a genre unto himself. You may know his nearly 2 decades of journalism in the New Yorker magazine. His many books of creative nonfiction include the much-beloved Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonder, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, as well as the Pulitzer Prize. His collections of essays, A Wanderer in the Perfect City and Vermeer in Bosnia. His 30 years of conversations with the artist Robert Irwin, gathered in Seeing is Forgetting the Name of the Thing One Sees, and its companion volume, True to Life, 25 Years of Conversations with David Hockney. In 2006, Ren was awarded the National Book Critics Circle Award for criticism for Everything That Rises, a Book of Convergences. The LA Times praised Ren's most recent book, Uncanny Valley, Adventures in the Narrative, for, quote, challenging us to pay attention, to see the world around us, to wake up to how we sleepwalk. Ren Weschler, it seems to me, is an ideal public intellectual. Not only is he a brilliant writer, storyteller, journalist, he's also a world-class impresario. He's the director of the New York Institute of the Humanities and for many years has curated the Chicago Humanities Festival. Ren brings interesting people and ideas together like no one else I've ever encountered. Today is an example. I'm delighted to hand things over to my dear friend, Ren Weschler.
Thank you. I didn't know she was going to do that. I'm sorry. And the other panelists, eminent panelists we're going to have today, you won't hear introductions like that because you have it on your program. So to speed things along. Let me just quickly describe how this is going to go. In a few seconds, I'm going to have Geoff Dyer introduce the proceedings. We are going to, in the spirit of Geoff's remarkable book, Zona, we are going to look at the film for a while, stop, talk about it, digress, look some more, stop, digress, and so forth. So it'll go like this. He will talk for about 15 minutes at the beginning. We'll show part of the film. Around half an hour into it, we're going to stop, and you'll meet the panelists, and they'll start talking a bit. We'll go on until the end of part 1. At that point, we'll take a break, a 10-minute break. One thing about this break, by the way, and those of you who are familiar with our events, we have an independent bookseller out there. We have books of all the panelists. These are terrific books. American civilization will die if you don't go and buy books. We also, by the way, have copies of *Stalker* and *The Mirror* and *The Sacrifice* DVDs. And you will die if you don't buy those. So you know, that's simple. Anyway, we will then reconvene after a short break. We'll show, at that point, part 2 is a bit longer than part 1. So halfway in the middle, at the place of Geoff's choosing, we'll stop there and talk a bit more. We'll talk a bit at the end. And by that time, it'll be getting close to 9 o'clock, and you will be released. But anyway, I want to thank the people here at the New School. Thank Stephanie Steicher, my assistant and associate, who does all the hard, heavy lifting right over there. And now I want to introduce my great friend and fellow mischief maker, Geoff Dyer, the award-winning Geoff Dyer, who will explain what we are up to today.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm having the most sort of extraordinary time in New York, and I seem to spend all my time either here or in the Cafe Loop over the road. It's the most restricted visit to New York I've ever had. But this afternoon will be one of the most expansive experiences. And also, I think it's worth saying this is a unique, it's a unique way to see Stalker. Unique in the sense of potentially uniquely irritating. For those, especially for those of you who've not seen the film before. So I guess this will be quite useful for me and the panelists. Could you put up your hands if you have seen Stalker before? Okay, now because I seem to be rather like I've had a stroke or something. Who has not seen it before? Oh, it looks to me it's absolutely 50-50. That makes life easy. So just to explain a few things about it. Obviously, for those of you who haven't seen the film before, it does not move at the pace of a James Bond film. And that's a good thing because, I don't know, I think I'm probably speaking for many of us. I mean, in my view, there is nothing more boring than a James Bond film. But the thing is, I think if the key thing is to give yourself to the time of the film totally, because actually if there is any kind of feeling for any sense of boredom, that tends to be a product not so much of what's happening on screen as it's more a kind of friction between your expectations of how you want a film, the speed at which you want a film to proceed and the way it does. But actually you're not going to have a chance to get bored because of all these interruptions that are coming. We're going to interrupt it at the first point at we've chosen the point at which we'll first interrupt it very, very carefully. So if you do feel a sense of frustration at that moment, don't worry, because it will be more than compensated for by the way that we resume showing the film. We are showing the film from a DVD. Now, those of you, Ren is somebody who is occasionally prone to exaggeration, but he assures me that there is no print of Stalker available on the North American continent, in either USA or Canada, which is kind of horrible state of affairs, but it doesn't entirely surprise me, because when we were trying to get the image for the cover of the book from Mosfilm, that was proving to be really, really quite tricky. I thought it would be straightforward. This is, Russia's many ways has sort of embraced capitalism, and this was a chance to get money. It involved getting getting an image and the rights for it. It was like we got sidetracked into a kind of John le Carré novel. And I promise you, this is not an exaggeration. We had a mole in Moscow who had some sort of in with Mosfilm, and we had to send her an odd number of red roses. This is just to get a high-res image for the cover. So if I understand things correctly, the film is just in this weird sort of limbo at the moment, that there is no kind of distribution deal available. And actually the situation, although there are prints in Britain, it's similarly in this kind of weird limbo, which is a great shame, because it means we're missing out on what we call in the trade cross-marketing opportunities. So Stalker was made in 1979, and I saw it on release when it came out in Britain in 1981. So I saw this film 30 years ago, and the reason that I ended up writing a book about it, well, I guess I had in the back of my mind a few lines of J.M. Coetzee's when he's talking about having read certain pages of Dostoevsky innumerable times, and still he finds that instead of becoming inured to their power, he finds himself sobbing uncontrollably. And for me, something similar happened in that although I'd seen this film more than any other film except Where Eagles Dare, I found that I still found myself overwhelmed by its power. It increased with every subsequent viewing. It seemed more and more profound, and I also came to realize how it had shaped my view of the world. I think you'll all be familiar with that thing. You go to see a film, however crap it is, and for a few seconds you get outside of the cinema, and the world is, you're seeing the world through the eyes of as though you're in the film that you've just seen. Now, with really bad films, it only lasts a couple of seconds. With other films, I'm thinking of that film that I saw recently, whatever it's called, Marcy May. I can't remember the title. That lasted for me for a long time, but Stalker has lasted. It's changed the way I've seen the world for approximately 30 years, and I think that's not unusual. Just a few very quick things about the history of the making of the film. It's not unusual, I think, for these great masterpieces of cinema. They tend to have rather troubled creation stories. So I think many of us will have seen the documentaries made about the making of Herzog's Fitzcarraldo or Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Productions which really, both of those films came close to not being made. And in the case of Stalker, I mean, it's interesting, I think, as we were very fond of saying in the 1980s. On the one hand, we like to see Tarkovsky as this persecuted Tolstoyevsky type of Russian artist persecuted by the system. But of course, as we like to say back then, a much cruder form of censorship operated in the West, the form of censorship known as the market. I mean, it's quite hard to believe, really, that somebody could have got the money to make films could have raised the money to make films like Mirror or Stalker. But get the money he did, and half of the budget was used. They'd shot half of the film in Tallinn, in Estonia, and the director of photography, forgive my pronunciation, Georgi Rehberg, who had done such brilliant work on Mirror. Something happened. There's all sorts of accusations about whose fault it was. Either he'd done something wrong, or the technicians processing the film, but back in Moscow. But anyway, the whole of it was all completely ruined and unusable. So a complete disaster. And it looked like at that point that the film would not be made. But as can happen, that delay proved to be absolutely crucial for the film becoming this great masterpiece that we're familiar with now. Because it was during that delay that Tarkovsky completely reconceived the central character of the stalker. First time around much closer to the character in the short story, in the short novel it was based on. Some kind of hustler, or Tarkovsky uses the word like a bandit or a drug dealer. And as you'll see, those of you who've not seen the film before, he's transformed into this rather tragic apostle or absolute believer in the zone. And that's so... I mean, it's almost inconceivable to us now that the stalker could have had some other kind of character. They managed to come up with some kind of way of getting some more money. The film, Rehberg, again, depending on whose account you believe, he either just stormed off the set or he was sacked by Tarkovsky. Another director of photography came in, and again he was either sacked or ran off. There's you can read an account of all of this stuff in Tarkovsky's diaries. And eventually they got a third DP on board, and it was finished. So it was the last film Tarkovsky made in the Soviet Union. And for my money, but please, you're not allowed to throw things, it was the last great, or even I think, it was the last great film Tarkovsky made. As always happens to any distinct stylist, it seems to me, and actually to Bergman and Wim Wenders as well, that the two films he went on to make in the West Nostalgia and Sacrifice. It felt rather self-parodic. So, in other words, what we're seeing, I think, is the absolute sort of the triumph of Tarkovsky's work, and you're dying for the film to start. So, enjoy. Thank you. Okay, I warned you that you might find that a little bit irritating, but I think you'll find this next part extremely stimulating. I'm going to just say something very, very brief that weirdly, I'm not even sure this is true, but it seems to me I'm watching that the subtitles are slightly different to the version that I've been watching in England. I don't know if such a thing is possible. But it's I think that will be revealed perhaps later on. But it certainly seems a bit different to the way I remember it. But now I'm going to hand you over to this lot. Who would like to go first?
I was struck by something that you mentioned in the book about the way the film begins. And after the people at Mosfilm had seen an early cut of the film, they kind of wanted to encourage Tarkovsky to speed it up a bit, and he felt that this wasn't helpful, and they said, "Well, we're just thinking of the audience." And this got him even madder, and he said, "The only audience I'm interested in is Ingmar Bergman and Robert Bresson." But then he said, I'm going to make it even slower, so that if anyone walks in accidentally and this isn't their kind of film, they can get up and leave, and then we'll be good riddance to them. And this struck a chord with me because we had exactly this discussion, except the capitalist version, when we were making The Conversation, which was 1972-73. And we would screen versions of the film. It was never previewed in any official sense, but we had screenings for a number, 5 or 10 people. And there was always this, can't it get going a little faster? Because Francis had just had a huge success with Godfather, and Gene Hackman was in the film, and it was just after Watergate, so people were expecting Popeye Doyle meets the Godfather in the Hotel Watergate. And so we did, unlike Tarkovsky, we actually tried to speed it up. But we learned what he learned, which is that if you do that, you then deliver even the more wrong audience to the heart of the film. Mm-hmm. And so we discovered that that was not the way to go, and we, just like Tarkovsky, we put it back the way it was originally, which is the way it is now when you see it. It's a slow, measured beginning, but it's something to talk about with this kind of very unusual measured pace of the film. What is the filmmaker trying to say, and whether you agree with that or not, the beginning is how you get in. That's how the needle kind of gets under the skin, and then the plunger can deliver whatever the film has to deliver.
Thank you, Walter.
I wanted to say a few things. One is Tarkovsky was not alone in Soviet Russia in some of this aesthetic tendency. We think of him as a kind of lonely comet, but you had a whole bunch of filmmakers like Alexei German, whose beautiful films will be seen next month at the Walter Reed Theater in a retrospective. You had Larisa Shepitko, Ivan Klimov, Parajanov, and they were all drawn to this long-duration take aesthetic, which seemed to be a way for them to escape socialist realism and find something more spiritual or more allegorical. It's interesting to me how the long duration take became a kind of international art film festival style, and the different uses to which it was put, like the Greek director Angelopoulos, Antonioni, Bresson, and Janško, and so on. You, in your book, you depart from some of them and like others, you know. What is the advantage of this? The tension, the long duration take. I think it sort of plunges you into the moment, and it doesn't guide you in the way that a lot of quick editing and music over the soundtrack guides you. So you're thrown back on your own resources. That's part of what happens with long duration takes. I was struck this time watching it how much tension there actually is, how much argument, how much contempt, bullets flying. It's not as though nothing's happening. You know, quite a bit is happening.
It really is. I was struck by how incredibly exciting it is.
Yes. So first we tell everybody nothing happens. It's very dull, and then the bullets start flying. It's quite a bit like James Bond.
Because the irony is, you might view this as being really slow, but this is by far the most action-packed part of this film. So indeed, if this is the time to get up and leave if that's too slow. For example, you know, with the Jeep going back and forth and the train and crashing into the zone, by far, this is James Bond practically compared to the rest of the movie. Sorry to interrupt you, but if I did.
I think there's also a sort of separation of genders that occurs in this part where, you know, the women are kind of, they come in and they're dismissed, and then it becomes a man's film.
Geoff was talking earlier about how films you see can influence the way you look at the world. And recently I saw the Wim Wenders documentary about Pina Bausch, which has changed the way I look at everything. And one of the beautiful moments in the film is there's a dancer who says that she had been dancing for Pina Bausch for years, and Pina Bausch had never said anything. And finally she said, "You just have to get crazier." And I think that there's a longing in all of us for craziness, and we want that in art, I think, more and more. And I think one of the reasons for me that Tarkovsky is so satisfying and beautiful is that it's pretty crazy. And it doesn't get any less crazy as the film, but it breaks every rule of what you think art or film is supposed to be.
Francine, as long as you were talking about breaking rules, especially in this 15 minutes or so that we just watched now, this segment, I was really struck by this framing technique that Tarkovsky often uses. I think it happens more at the beginning of this film, but it's in some very important moments later too, where I think, Geoff, you write about this in your book, where you don't quite know who's doing the seeing. The framing is in an unexpected place, or, for example, it moves across the outside of that wall and suddenly finds the stalker in the window, but no one is standing there. There's not quite a sense of who is doing the looking. And also, this really becomes important later, we always don't know why we're looking at what we're looking at. So the camera will rest meditatively on an object while something entirely unrelated is happening in the sound and in the story.
I wanted to say something about the sets also and the framing, because I was struck this time with, it made me think of Kabakov, is that the name of the Russian artist who
Kabakov.
What? Kabakov, who you know, would set out these kinds of installations of the drab life of Soviet Russia, you know, and there is something that's on the borderline between film and installation art sometimes in Tarkovsky, and you see that also in the set with all the water on the floor, you know. So you know, it feels like he's very influenced by that. By just looking at the set as a work of art in itself, you know, and the way that water is always made to expand the frame by mirroring, so to speak. Yeah.
I'd like to just say something briefly about how these characters, you know, who are really, you know, they're called writer and scientist and so on. We don't even get their names, but they really are classic late Soviet archetypes. I mean, I actually had the privilege of spending some time in the USSR in the late 70s, early 80s, and I sort of absorbed, I was quite young, you know, but I absorbed this Brezhnev period, ennui, or whatever you want to call it. And I also met some of these people from the Moscow intelligentsia. For example, the writer is a dead-on, practically a caricature of a fusion of a number of figures who were, you know, writers in the Moscow scene in the late 70s, and a lot. You know, it's interesting, Geoff. When I read your book, you know, and you mentioned in response to the writer saying we should write about nothing, you know, and then you went into a very interesting paragraph about how this is reminded you of Flaubert and so on. And this is a philosophical, you know, and it's a completely correct observation. But another way to look at it is, you know, it's also a straight political comment. You know, Tarkovsky seeds this film with such things. The writer says, we should write about nothing, and he's absolutely, you know, and there's another comment about the truth, you know, digging for the truth, and then you discover that it's shit. And this is also, you know, overt. This was, in fact, when I saw this film for the first time, I thought, how is it that they let him get away with this? You know, and it's all across the film. And you know, I remember Ren mentioned when he invited us all to this event, you know, that that statement at the beginning where the Nobel Prize winner says something about our little country was a way of sneaking it past the censors, but you know, 99.9% of the certainly the Soviet viewing audience saw that as irony. I mean, how else, you know? Anyway.
But it wasn't just he didn't just sneak it past the censors. Let's be honest. Tarkovsky was an object of pride for the Soviet Union. Unlike someone like German, whose films almost never got distributed in Soviet Russia, they sort of paraded Tarkovsky around to film festivals until he got a little out of hand.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful that the scientist is the superstitious one. You know, that he's the one when the writer is about to go back. I mean, because obviously it's bad luck to come back when you've started on the journey. The scientist is the one who says, don't do it. And then the writer says, are you really a scientist? I mean, it's one of those moments that can just go right by you, but when you're paying attention, the way he makes you pay attention, you go...
You know, what else is great about the moment of Don't Go Back is that it's such a great foreshadowing of what's about to come. I don't want to give it away to those who haven't seen, but they're going to a place where it really could be a matter of life and death, whether you step back into a room or not.
You know, it's interesting, the word he uses, the scientist, he says, nilzya. It is not allowed. The subtitle was not correct. It is not allowed. That was the Soviet word, you know. Nilzya. It is not allowed. I mean, old lady said it to me all across the country. That is not allowed.
What were you doing?
Well, I was rolling a joint in the Hermitage. No, I was too close to a painting in a Hermitage, for example. It is not allowed. You know, over and over that word. Yeah.
So I'm just going to give some orders here. I think for one, I'm really, really interested in the divergence between the subtitles we're reading and what they're actually saying. So do please more of that in the parts that are to come.
I don't even speak Russian, but that word I remember.
Unless somebody desperately wants to say something. Yeah, Walter.
The sequence where we stop the film is Geoff in his book. Geoff describes this sequence with great feeling and poetry. It's a tracking sequence along as they move through this landscape on the little rail car. And just by accident, I came across a review of a film made in 1897. This is a short film called Haverstraw Tunnel, shot by Billy Bitzer, who was famous Griffith's cameraman for Birth of a Nation. But as a young man, he shot this film. Same thing. The first tracking shot, putting a camera on a train and going through a landscape. And the reviewer, who was writing for the New York Mail and Express, said, the way in which the unseen energy swallows up space and flings itself into the distance is as mysterious as an allegory. We hold our breath instinctively as we are swept along in the rush of the phantom cars. Our attention is held with the vice of fate. So
there it was, right at the beginning. Yeah.
Well, I've written a whole book about this film, and I'm learning an awful lot. I'm having a great time. So we're going to move on now, and this is really we stopped it there because you're now going to have one of the supreme cinematic experiences, if you're not already having it. Thank you. So we'll the next break won't be painful at all because it's the end of part one. Thank you all. Do you know, it's so strange. I was talking about the subtitles being different before, but even the sound seems different. But that's the zone. It's always changing. One of the nice things I think about seeing it in a room full of people, one often under commented on aspect of the film becomes much more pronounced. That is to say, the comedy. It's really, really striking that how funny it is. Just a couple of quick points. I mean, it's the power. I've seen. I mean, I really didn't think I wasn't desperate to see this film again at this moment. The power of it is extraordinary. It's completely drawn me in again. I hope at some point, I mean, the people on the panel can say what they want, but I'd love it if Walter in particular will say something about the sound. And I'd just like to make one sort of technical observation, which I think is really key to the film. You remember that sequence where there's that burned out military vehicle, and they start walking towards it, and it's a point of view shot, isn't it? Obviously, it's somebody walking towards that, and we get closer and closer, and then gradually they come into view, all three of them. So whose point of view was it? Because it clearly, physically, literally couldn't have been one of those. And that's one of the ways in which we get this sense of the zone as being this sentient place. And also what it means is actually that point of view is ours. We're not just watching this place, the zone, we are in it. We're along for the ride as well. I don't know. Would you like to begin, Walter, by saying something about the sound?
Sure. It's I have I guess a kind of temporal link with this film because for all the difficulties he was having making this film, Francis Coppola was simultaneously making Apocalypse Now. The dates of when Francis started shooting in 1976 and finished in 79, this started in 77 and finished in 79. There were heart attacks in both cases. Tarkovsky had a heart attack, Martin Sheen had a heart attack. Both films suffered what seemed like catastrophes at the midpoint. A typhoon wrecked everything on Apocalypse Now, and then this, with Stalker, the difficulty with the film stock, where everything had to be reconsidered. But, in both cases, that pause gave time for the directors to reconsider what they were doing. There was recasting for an Apocalypse Now. Harvey Keitel was recast with Martin Sheen. Stalker had a reconception of who he was. The scene in Apocalypse Now was Francis and I got together at this. He came back to San Francisco and had a discussion about where are we and what have we shot and what do we need, and I suggested adding a scene which was the some point of contact as they go upriver, which turned into the murder on the sampan scene. Both are people moving into a forbidden landscape, going upriver to Cambodia to visit some mysterious person, to kill him, in fact. Here, the magic of the room. So anyway, there are just lots of similarities. We also had a very aggressive attitude toward the sound of Apocalypse Now. We wanted to invent a whole new way of listening to sound, which turned into what has become the 5.1 format. The standard now is the standard format for motion pictures, but was not unknown at the time. You mentioned in the book this possibility of let's have a theater where only Stalker plays just over and over again, and whenever you want to go see the film, you can go to that theater. And that was actually Francis's idea for Apocalypse Now, is that he would build a theater in the geographic center of the United States, somewhere in Kansas, and it would be a building kind of like an IMAX theater before the fact of IMAX theaters, and families would drive from all over the country, like going to Mount Rushmore. They'd come to see Apocalypse Now, but we'll have to have a super sound format to make this a real experience. And so the theater obviously was never built. But the artifact of this was the sound. Listening to this soundtrack, this has been recomposed, I think, by somebody else into this 5.1 format. I don't think Tarkovsky mixed the sound like this at the beginning. What strikes me most about the sound is that it's all dubbed, that the dialogue is all added after the fact.
In Italian cinema, that's always the case. Is that not always the case with Soviet films?
No, I don't know. I don't know enough about Soviet filmmaking to know. There is a kind of a national characteristic. Italian, it's very common to dub everything, although less so now than in the old days. In France, following Jean Renoir's dictum, there was just the opposite. Everything had to be sync sound. So I'm listening to the voices, and I'm hearing this kind of everything is in the same relationship to the microphone, no matter where they are in the scene. There was one brief little moment where I think I heard some original dialogue, just one line of dialogue, but it had a very different quality to it. But there is a very inventive use of sound effects, and processing sound effects through synthesizers, which is something we were also doing in Apocalypse Now. It was just something in the air, and of trying to fuse music and sound to make them cohabit in a more friendly way. So I would say it's imaginative, but technically a little crude, this sound, I would say. But for me, the imaginativeness carries the day. I would much rather that than the opposite.
Yeah, the music it strikes me how cool the music is, actually.
Yeah, it's very good music. And not, it doesn't overstay its welcome. There are long sections where you think, well, he would put some music in here, but he doesn't. He just leaves you on your own. And I appreciate that greatly. There's one more quote here, which I ran across. I had this in my kit for a number of years, but it's another Russian. You were talking in the book about how Tarkovsky rescues the abandoned artifacts of humanity and renders them into this beautiful state of being cinematically. And this is Nabokov talking from The Gift. And he says, you should feel a piercing pity for the tin box in a waste patch of land, for the cigarette card from a series of national costumes trampled in the mud, for the poor stray word repeated by the kind-hearted, weak, loving creature who has just been scolded for nothing, for all the trash of life, which by means of a momentary alchemic distillation is turned into something valuable and eternal.
Oh, bollocks. We should have had this session before I finished the book. Then I could have put that in.
I was very conscious watching this section this time of the ways in which Tarkovsky compels you to surrender to the film and give yourself over and get rid of all the things you think of as logical and sensible. And in Geoff's book, you talk about the nuttiness, so to speak, of the whole nuts and bandages situation, and the fact that no one is asking, what's up with that? You stop asking, and you're there in that sense with them because what you have brought to it, your own logical self, is kind of dissolved by that.
I want to make a few random comments. One, how many shots show us their backs, you know? How much dialogue is delivered with their backs to us, in that Miles Davis turning away from the audience way. It's funny this time, having mentioned the whole aesthetic of the long shot, the long duration shot, it seems as though he doesn't take pains to orchestrate complexly the way, let's say, Yanchko or Angelopoulos would. They're mostly rather simple shots that go on for a long time. And very often it seems that the figures are in the foreground. So he's not really working with that much depth of field. It's actually often a rather shallow composition, you know, except for kind of these landscape cutaways. So he's not doing that distanced Mizoguchi thing, you know. He's really showing us the figures close up, almost in, you know, a medium shot or a close-up shot. And then and the whole thing with the backs, you know, they talk a lot. You know, there's a lot of dialogue in this scene, in this film. So it's not like it's not as though it's a slow, semi-silent film. You know, it's really a talkie.
Having them face away from the camera makes the dubbing easier.
It does make it easy. And it does seem to me this time that all the sound is on top, coming from the same place, and that is fairly unrealistic by American and French standards, as you point out. I also thought about two genres that this one relates to. One is the horror movie where you go out into nature and don't know what to expect, you know. And there's a lot in this film about nature and alienation from nature, just as there is in Solaris, you know. And there's so many overlaps between Solaris and Stalker, I think, in this going to this strange place, which is a kind of, the place itself is sentient, as often happens in horror movies. And the other, of course, is the Western, where, you know, there's this sort of trek across an open landscape, you know, with the feeling of ominousness always close by.
Thank you. Dana and Michael, would you?
Yeah, the means by which he invests the zone with that ominousness is really, it's in this section that we just watched that you see it all starting to take place. The nuts and bandages that are introduced with no explanation whatsoever. That at first we think, I thought at first they were being thrown for mines, maybe landmines or some actual physical danger. But it soon becomes clear that we're just in a kind of ontologically dangerous place. It's not even clear what could happen with the nuts and bandages as they land. But they're also funny. It also becomes part of the comic business that they're throwing them. So that's all beautiful. As far as the sound, I just wanted to note that the music, it's the theme to Stalker, what I think of as sort of the Stalker theme song kicks in this part we just watched, which is that flute, that kind of eerie flute theme with the drone, Middle Eastern drone in the background. The score is by Edward Artemyev, who often composed, I think he also composed the Solaris score, I'm not sure, but was a composer that worked with Tarkovsky. And there's a great interview with him that's, I believe, on the DVD that this comes from, because I recognize these subtitles, the 2 DVD set. And the composer interview is just incredible. He talks about what it's like to work with Tarkovsky. He also had to scrap his entire score because he wrote something that Tarkovsky decided was wrong. So once again, as with the film, he had to begin from zero. And he talks about how he and Tarkovsky had long talks about the concept of the film before he started to compose. And one of the things Tarkovsky said is that he didn't think music should function as lining. That was his word. Music shouldn't be the lining of a film, which I thought was really great. And so the music in this film, I think, it isn't a lining. It isn't just reinforcing whatever we're seeing on screen. I think it's creating a whole other world that's strangely Eastern in a way. There's something a little Eastern about the score, including the orchestration. And it's very striking. It's a beautiful theme.
Actually, it's interesting, Geoff. I learned something new from one of the things I learned new from your book was that the original intention was to shoot the film in Soviet Central Asia, which I had no idea about, which is fascinating. Maybe that's one reason that you had this Eastern feeling. I would just say a couple of things, and they're kind of personal. I mean, in a sense, my two favorite shots, kind of short shots in Tarkovsky, that illustrate his basic idea. One of his basic ideas was that you should see time unfolding within a shot. And of course, with these long, elaborate takes, of course, you see time unfolding and so forth. But sometimes in a much more kind of, in a smaller way, in a smaller scale way, you see that. And that moment when the stalker lies face down in the zone soil, and it's just as if he's returning to his lover, is fantastic. But the moment that really gets me is when that little inchworm inches across his finger.
It's a bit like sort of Blue Velvet, or.
Oh, how so?
Isn't there that scene where they've come across the hand?
A bug crawls into an ear.
The
ear.
The ear. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, although, in some ways, yeah. But anyway, that... I'm being diplomatic. No.
Point taken, sorry.
That inchworm, somehow, Tarkovsky, I bet he put it there, I would like to know. But he lets it...
It was added by Lucas and CGI.
Yeah, okay. But by the way, the other short, brief kind of illustration of that idea in Tarkovsky's films is in the film called The Mirror. You have this very interesting scene where Ignat, who's basically the actor playing the young Tarkovsky, suddenly sees a middle-aged woman in this room who asks him to read something from a book. She just appears like an apparition, and she has a cup of tea on the top of a piano, if I remember correctly. And he reads this letter from Pushkin to another writer about Russia and how the Enlightenment passed Russia, and it was really about Russia, but he would not change Russia for anything else, and so on. And Ignat reads this, and he turns around, and the woman has gone, and her cup of tea has gone, and you see a shot of condensation, a circle of condensation evaporating on the top of the piano. And it never fails to, hairs rise on my arms when I see this shot. It's just so powerful. The other thing I would say about this sequence, this particular part of the film, is what is the first thing you see when we kick into color? Does anybody remember? The first thing you see?
The cross?
Cross-shaped telegraph poles, And Tarkovsky was not really given to overt symbolism in general, and he would be probably furious with me for bringing up such a thing, but it's not unintentional.
But this is a film where somebody wears a crown of thorns.
Later, yeah. That's true.
That's a spoiler.
That's true. But also, it's three of them. You got these three, Anyway. I don't want to go into, I don't have anything more to say. I don't have any more analysis on that, but it's something, it's kind of interesting, I would say, that he does that.
Could I just say the most obvious thing? It probably doesn't need saying, but when it switches from sepia into color, it's so shockingly beautiful that it makes you feel as if you've never seen a color film before, and that no one has ever seen or made a color film. I mean, it really makes you see it as if for the first time, which is pretty miraculous.
That is so true. And let me just get this straight, right. Are they allowed to go to the restroom now?
You are indeed allowed to go to the restrooms. We're going to take a 15-minute break, but not without first thanking our panelists.
While the other members of the panel are coming up here, just a bit of a few points. We at the Institute of the Humanities are always hoping to improve your experience. So if we do this again, we're going to get you to sit there in soaking wet coats so that you can have a fully immersive experience. I forgot to mention something at the beginning. Walter particularly was talking about the the problems in the history of making the film, and those continued in a way after it was finished. The first time the film was broadcast on TV in Britain, somebody obviously sort of saw the first bit of it, and they thought it was a black and white film, and so they broadcast the whole film in black and white. The transition to colour never happened, so effectively they never made it to the Zone, but that's the kind of country I come from. It's just so striking to me how, it's just incredible how much it reminds me. Apparently when Kafka used to read his stories to his friends, they'd all sit around howling with laughter. So that's something that the comedy of it is increased. But also, I think as it goes on, one becomes more struck by certain things. Obviously, many people have commented on the way that in some ways it was a prophetic film, that, Tarkovsky anticipated Chernobyl, all this sort of thing. But it's also backward-looking as well, isn't it? It's clearly not a film about the Gulag, but it's a film that is haunted by the Gulag. The Gulag is there constantly in this word Zona, in the stalker's hair. He's got that Zek haircut. I think that becomes much more pronounced as the film goes on. A final point before I hand over. When I was going through the proofs of the book, on the fourth, I think I was going through the proofs for the fourth time, I noticed something so important during that last scene that I had to make a big change. Did you notice where the camera went after they'd all been after the sort of long bum fight sequence, and when after the writer is nearly accident? Did you notice where the camera went? Yeah. It's just incredible that. None of the humans make it into the room, but the camera goes into the room, and by implication, the camera has its deepest wish realized, which is basically that this film came into existence against all odds. I'm sure everybody wants to talk about the dog. Who would like to go first? Francine, maybe.
I thought the dog was a wolf till I read your book. So, speaking of your book, I had a thought about this section of the film, and then I couldn't remember if it was my thought or if I read it in your book. So I'm just going to say it, and those of you who've read the book will be hearing it again. And that is that there are these three moments, and the first is when Stalker is talking about music and the generosity of art and the beauty of music, and then when the writer is in the meat mincer talking about the horror of his life and art. And then a little later when Stalker's talking about why he brings people to the Zone. And I thought, obviously Tarkovsky is just having this big argument with himself about art and about making art, and it's the sort of argument that anyone who's trying to do it has in the middle of the night all the time. But I'd never seen it on a screen before or done so beautifully, and not obviously about that, except it is about that. Mm-hmm. Was that in your book?
I can't quite remember, actually. Almost certain everything is in the book. It's the key to all mythologies.
I had a comment about the prophetic nature of the Zone and Chernobyl, and there's no doubt that there's a prophetic quality, and we had a Zone later. But one thing that to this day a lot of people don't recognize in the West is that there was a major nuclear accident in near the town of Chelyabinsk in 1957 when they. By the way, speaking of zones, this was in a closed zone of the Soviet Union where researchers like our scientists were working, and so no foreigners were allowed there. There were closed cities and all of that, and they were doing nuclear production there, and just simply pouring plutonium, all kinds of highly radioactive substances into storage tanks just underground, and one of them blew up. And apparently there was a genuine mushroom cloud. It spread all kinds of nasty stuff all over the landscape, and then a zone was created in the late. This is 2 decades before this film, mm-hmm. And Soviet citizens knew about this, but it was highly confidential, and they were not. You simply didn't talk about it. People would talk about it quietly at home, but Soviet citizens knew about it. And so this whole early in the film, when we hear about the zone, monkey, and how she's a victim of the zone, a good friend of mine in Moscow who took me around when I was writing for Rolling Stone in the mid-'80s about Russian underground culture, was born near Chelyabinsk a year later, and he was a giant. He is a giant. He's got all the features of giantism, big forehead and so on. And we talked about this, and he said, he said with, very good humored way, he said, I'm a genetic hiccup. So he was a zone child, let's say. So that's one thing that I just wanted to say about that, because I don't think Tarkovsky, there are many kinds of zones, obviously. And I don't think he meant directly that thing. Obviously, we're talking about a place where your innermost wish is granted, not a nuclear waste site. But I did want to bring that up. And then another thing I would say about this particular section we just watched is, when the phone rings, and it's the wrong number. This is another great Russian joke, Soviet joke. But then after he speaks to his colleague, and it becomes clear that something strange is going on, and then the writer says, what is going on with you? And they have this little dialogue, and then at one point the writer says, you might get your Nobel and everything. But then a couple sentences later he says, you think you'll get one thing, but you'll get another kind of thing entirely. And this is the same decade when Sakharov, Andrei Sakharov, the father of the Soviet H-bomb, got a Nobel Peace Prize, not a Nobel Prize for physics, And I'm not saying that that's direct, but it was definitely in the air, let's say. This kind of, these kinds of characters were there. And actually, Sakharov was then in a closed zone. He was exiled to Gorky because of his actions to try to stop Soviet, atmospheric tests and so forth.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Philip, Philip, you don't have to speak if. But you're
I'll just say two things. One, I completely agree with Francine that the film gets wilder and wilder. It's so Russian, They just sit around talking about their wasted lives, and so of course that's the Chekhovian element, Sometimes I resist Tarkovsky. I just get to that point, and then I think, well, I'm not sure the writing is good enough to go toe to toe with Chekhov, and so it sometimes I feel like there's a lot of bluster, and I like the fact that scene slows down so much, and there we are, we're stuck, But I feel pummeled and bullied sometimes, and so I just want to record my skepticism and resistance.
Yeah. No, that's that big chunk. I find that does, my attention sags a bit in that, and I think it's a really good point that some of the writing is pretty weak. I think in that sequence.
All I would say is that the great power of the section we just watched, I think, is the audacity of the transitions, just how audacious they get, and there ceases to be any attempt at all to explain why the dry tunnel that isn't a dry tunnel leads back to the place that it began, or how the meat mincer leads into the room with the hillocks of dust in it, and that all of those spaces just have their own being in such a kind of bold way. And I think that's actually is my favorite section of the film that we just saw, not really because of anything to do with the bickering between science and art and all the allegory in the dialogue, which I agree gets a little heavy, but because of just the visual audacity and the kind of conceptual audacity of all of those spaces that are established one after another and that all seem to flow from some strange internal logic.
Yeah, I love it when he goes to the door and suddenly you realize he's going to have to wade through a pool of water,
And the knapsack over the head, which you write about in the book, I love that they shout out again to the knapsack that was so dear to the professor. And of course, at the end, you realize it's because he had his bomb in it. But it's almost as if his thermos and his sandwiches meant just as much to him.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, sorry, I forgot to say there's a new book about Tarkovsky coming out by Nariman Shakov, teaches at Stanford, and he points out that during that sequence when they're all having that sort of rather damp pillow talk, and it zooms in on Professor as he listens, and if you look very closely at the shiny buttons on the Professor's coat, you can see a reflection of the lights and the camera and the cameraman. That is deep stalker geekhood, isn't it? In fact, should we play that whole section all over again, just so you can see that? Mr. Murch.
Well, I was just reminded when we began this section, it was because it was part 2, that there was, in a sense, this, as you say in the book, this hiccup of an intermission that just gives us a kind of it's like your hard drive is starting up again. Films at this time in the 70s were making a transition. When we were doing The Godfather, it was just assumed that there would be an intermission in the film because it was 3 hours long, and you didn't make long films without putting an intermission in it because of people's bladders and because of the theater owners wanting to sell more popcorn and because it was a tradition. And in fact, in The Godfather, we had created an intermission right after the killing of Sollozzo and McCluskey. Then at one point, Bob Evans, who was the head of the studio, came in and said, "We're not going to have an intermission. The film is too strong. We don't want to let them off the hook." And so we took it out, as a strict intermission. You can still see sort of the echo of it. The car drives off and music comes in very strong, and then there's a transition to a lighter thing, and it's a historical curiosity, really, that we made that transition during the 1970s, and now people don't even think about doing that anymore. Whereas at that time it was part of the grammar of making a long film was to put an intermission into it. 2001 had an intermission in the late 60s.
That was true of all Italian movies of a certain length. There would always be part 1 and then part 2. They'd always have an intermission.
Well, I guess, so this is the moment when I have to compliment you all on your bladders. It's really, you're just holding out so well. And as I say, we've only got maybe 15 minutes to go. And then at the end of that, we'll deliver our summings up. And then, of course, you can have your say. If your minds have not been blown yet by this film, I offer a full guarantee that they will be with the next and last segment. That sequence when we see Monkey's head in the headscarf, and we assume she's walking, and then we see that she's being carried on her dad's shoulders. It is, I think, that's one of the most profound moments that you're in any work of art. And then that last sequence with the telekinetic moving of the glasses, it just sends shivers up one's spine. So let me hand over to the panel.
I want to know why does a monkey on his shoulders?
Why is she on his shoulders? I guess because she can't walk.
No. Just why is that moment one of the most profound in any work of art to you?
God. Because it gets to me so deeply, and I think it's that. It just looks so beautiful with the headscarf. It's just in terms of its inexhaustible power, I think, for me. Does it not do it for you?
I think it's a play on Dreyer's Odette. You know how in Odette the dead woman comes to life, and you have to just trust that it's a miracle because you're seeing it in front of your eyes. So in this case, it's a negative miracle. The miracle doesn't happen.
Oh, superb. Yeah, that's it. That's why. Thank you, Philip.
I think there's a couple of interesting things to consider here. One is that the film is so constructed that it can open itself up to all kinds of interpretations over a long period of time, which is a good signifier of something that can endure as a work of art. You can analyze the film from knowing Soviet history of the time, and it will resonate. It will accept that. But then you can also just look at it as a questions that are generally posed to human beings on Earth, which is, why are we here? And what is life all about? What are we supposed to do? What is dangerous? What is not? What is responsibility? And it will accept all of these things as well. I'm put in mind of a film I saw. I think it was a television program about filmmakers and the films that inspired them. And there was one program which was dedicated to Marty Scorsese. This was probably about 15 years ago, I think. And he was talking in his Scorsese intense way about, kind of like Geoff is talking, about a film that deeply influenced him. And the more he talked, the more you wanted to see this thing that had so deeply stamped Marty with this open-hearted realization of the potentials of cinema. And then, in fact, after a long digression from him, they did show the scene that he was talking about. They cut to the scene, and my reaction was, what? You saw that in that? So there's an element of that here, and no,
Very, very politely put.
and Geoff talks quite openly about this, and this is, it's really a interesting, peculiar thing, which is the dynamics between an audience and let's say an audience of one and film, but it could be any work of art, but we're talking about film, which is that film is a language. It's a way of communicating, very complex system of signs and signifiers and use of time. And at a certain point in your life, Geoff was 22 when he saw this film, you are primed for a revelation of some kind. And something is likely to happen, and some film is likely to trigger that realization. It could be Stalker, it could be When Eagles Dare, but for Geoff prompting this book, it was Stalker. And so that the opening up is something that's happening within Geoff that finds places to attach itself, just as I was saying about this film being open to so many different interpretations. So the film is worthy of being the can opener that opens up a new way of looking at the world for you. But the other point that Geoff makes is that this then becomes less accessible to subsequent generations, that there's a moment for a film and an audience where there is a really powerful interaction because of what's come before or because of what has not come before, and that suddenly happens when you watch this film. And it does open up a whole new way of being, and people get very excited about it, and that excitement endures. Future generations look and say, like, what? So Geoff makes the point that for him it was Stalker, but he looked at Breathless and goes, what? And the next generation looks at this, they who have been influenced by Reservoir Dogs, and they look at this and go, what? So there's a very complicated dynamic which is gone into nicely in the book of how a work of art can influence people and what we read into the work and what is actually there.
Thank you.
That's interesting you say that, because I just wanted to report some little family story, which is when my son was 7, and was already deep into the Cartoon Network aesthetic of Cartoon Network and fast cuts and all that stuff, and didn't yet read very well, and I happen to have STALKER on a laptop, not unlike that laptop, and I said to him, I was just kind of trying an experiment. I said, with this film, by the great Russian director Tarkovsky, it doesn't really matter, but the premise of the film is you have to get through a bunch of obstacles and so forth, and in the center of this zone, which appeared after something mysterious happened, there's a room, and if you get to that room, then your innermost wish is granted to you. And he listened, and he was very interested, and he said, well, I'd like to see it, and I opened the thing, and I thought I would get 10 minutes before he said, okay, Cartoon Network time. He watched the entire thing straight through. This is a film in Russian, which he didn't understand, with subtitles he couldn't read. And he was just completely fascinated. And then, just to finish the story, then about 2 weeks later, we were on a Croatian island called Lošinj. And I should explain, I lived in Slovenia for years. My son is bilingual in Slovenian and English, but he doesn't speak Russian. And he invited his friend over. And the two of them watched the film again, straight through. 2 7-year-olds lying together. It was the cutest scene, lying on a bed with the laptop open in front of them, watching straight through. Because he explained to his friend, you have to get to this room, and then your innermost. So, I felt like there's hope, somehow,
I've thought a lot about why the last scene just kills me, which it doesn't. And it's partly because it feeds into several of my own obsessions. And I think when art really gets to you, often it's for that reason. One of the obsessions is Russian icon painting, and the other is obviously telekinesis. The way I came to Tarkovsky, I'd never heard of him, but I was a huge fan of icon painting, and someone said to me, well, he's made this movie, Andrei Rublev, about an icon painter. And I think it was in San Francisco, and I think I went and saw it like every night for a week. And I was just, I couldn't get over it. And when I look at STALKER, and particularly at the first shot of Monkey in her headscarf, it's like an icon. It's like a moving icon, and he's like showing you one icon after another. Then Telekinesis. Around the time that I think I first saw STALKER, it was made around the same time as this film called Time of the Gypsies by Kusturica, in which telekinesis is a big kind of plot point. And I've always been interested in, and I had been even as a kid, trying to move things mentally. It didn't work.
Can you do it now?
No, I never could. But the other day I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was trying to describe what it was about the film that moved me, and I said, well, it has a great telekinesis. It actually has two of them. At the beginning, when the glass rattles on the table, it never occurred to me until much later that it was the train going by. I somehow automatically assumed. Anyway, Monkey's telekinesis, I was telling a friend of mine about it, and she said, well, what is telekinesis? And I said, well, it's when you think about something and you move it by thinking about it. And she said, oh, well, that's what it means to make a film. And I thought, oh, bingo. Finally, finally on the subject of Monkey, everyone's saying all through the film, she's damaged, she's damaged, she's damaged, she's ruined by the zone. And in fact, maybe she can't walk. I mean, she does have legs. We've heard she doesn't. She does, in fact, have legs. But maybe she's damaged, but she can move things with her mind, which is something else. So here he's gone all the way through the zone and done this thing, which is apparently or supposedly produced a subnormal child, and has in fact produced an extra normal child, or a superior child in some essential way. So that's a little part of why I love that seen so much.
Great.
Is she
You
meant
see,
to be-
Dana?
Is she meant to be an ominous child in any way, do you think? This is in your book, too, and I know some people have read the ending as a sort of slouching toward Bethlehem kind of moment, as you hear Ode to Joy on the train, and it's so strange. The ending to this film is so strange. I mean, the whole film is so strange, of course, but all the rest of it, to me, can somehow fit into some coherent aesthetic whole, but every time I've seen it, this is the third time I've seen it only, unlike some of you, I haven't been seeing it, my whole life, although I did first see it, I think, 20 years ago or so. But I always think the film is going to end at that moment that we just saw, where we stopped it last time, where the camera pulls into the room and the rain comes down. And in fact, the film could end right there and be a perfect sort of completed work of art. And the coda has just always baffled me completely. It's chilling and it's beautiful, but I don't understand it at all. And I would love to hear anyone's interpretation of what Monkey and Beethoven and everybody is up to.
I sort of feel it would be so weird. I mean, it's that, what's his name? I can't remember who wrote the story where he says that he finds her very, very sinister and a sort of antichrist figure or something. And that seems so perverse, really, because it seems surely it's got to be a compensatory thing for the damage done to her physically, but by the zone. And I don't, although the dog is whimpering because something strange is going on, it feels to me like a sort of religious and redemptive moment rather than a
miracle.
It's a miracle. Yeah.
And it's about the future in some way, right? Obviously, because it's a child and the onrushing train, there's something about it that's about what comes next, what comes after the next generation after the zone.
And it's the ultimate what he's brought back from the zone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the lovely doggy that he's brought back.
Yeah, I mean, and it's that nicely balanced paradox which he gets into when he's lying there talking to his wife, and she says, "Don't you think I would have something to wish for?" As does he, and here this little conundrum of, is the zone in some way responsible for what happened to Monkey? But if it is, then why isn't the room the solution to that problem? Why doesn't he go into the room or take his wife in there and say, please make Monkey whole again?
Yeah.
Because of this, the other thing about the wish is that it doesn't give you what you say you want. It gives you what is deep within you, which you may not know exactly what it is. And so you're afraid to go into the room to confront that issue. And yet, out of this whole spiral of wishes and being afraid of wishes, Monkey does, out of all of this, she does have an ability, the telekinetic ability, which in some way, in a kind of religious, mysterious way, compensates for the imagined trouble that she has, which is never really specified either.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll hear from Philip, and then have we got time for some questions after Philip, Laura? Too late. Okay, Philip, the last word.
Oh, too bad I'm the last word, because I'm a non-believer. I'm one of those writers and intellectuals with the dead eyes that they were talking about at the end. and so
except that when you see the other side of the room, you see that it's loaded with books.
Well,
Yes.
But I think that I interpreted that scene where the stalker is shivering and raving about the lack of belief, as in a way ambiguous in that I think Tarkovsky was having his cake and eating it too, in that there's just a suggestion that actually this guy is delusional and that the zone doesn't exist, certainly as a grantor of wishes, and he's not going to be able to bring people back there because nobody believes in it,
But he did bring back the dog.
Yeah, and color.
Well, he brought back the dog, but I don't think that was his innermost wish. But anyway, so I think that in a way, Tarkovsky, the Christian Tarkovsky was saying, believe, like, in Peter Pan, and the skeptic was saying maybe it's all a delusion, and so in the end he leaves the audience with hope. But I prefer the first version.
Okay. Ren is going to say a few words just to let you know, because I feel you haven't had enough Tarkovsky today. So tomorrow we're showing Mirror at the Museum of the Moving Image. And then on Monday, I'll be speaking at the School of Visual Arts, and we'll be doing this nice thing. I'll be reading some passages from the book, and it'll be synced in with some sections of the film. So if you haven't had enough of Tarkovsky, and I know you haven't had enough of me, see you again on Monday. And here's Ren, who we thank very much.
Fantastic. I'm sorry about not taking questions from the audience, but we actually have to clear the hall relatively quickly. So as you leave quickly. But not. I just also want to say that we do these things pretty regularly. Go to our website, nyihumanities.org. Sign up, and you'll hear about more of them. This turned out, we had our cake and ate it too. We got to see the movie, and this worked. We were talking backstage about possibly doing it with a James Bond movie next year. But anyway, thank you all so much. You were a terrific audience, and we had a great time.